This is one of the most successful running shoes on the planet. But when it first came out, people thought it was a joke. It was oversized, it was clunky, and it broke the #1 rule in running. And yet, in just a few years, this brand went from under $3 million in sales to over $2.5 billion. It's now growing faster than Nike and closing in on running's biggest names. This is the story of how the ugliest shoe in running quietly took over the sport, using a strategy any brand can learn from. And it's a strategy any of us can steal. It starts with the rule everyone else was following. Rewind to 2009. The entire running world was obsessed with one idea: less is more. A best-selling book called Born to Run had convinced everyone that modern shoes were the problem and that humans were built to run barefoot. It became a movement. Runners ditched cushioning entirely. The icon of that movement was this: the Vibram 5 Fingers, a shoe with almost nothing under your foot. The philosophy was simple: thinner soles, less support, less shoe. A minimalist shoe had a stack height of maybe 3 to 13 millimeters, barely anything between your foot and the ground. Every major brand chased the same trend. Nike sold millions of pairs of its flexible, stripped back, free. The whole industry was zigging in one direction, and that is exactly when one tiny company decided to zag. In the same year, 2009, two Frenchmen were doing the complete opposite. Nicolas Mermoud and Jean-Luc Diard were former Salomon employees, obsessed with running down mountains as fast as possible. Going downhill for hours destroys your legs. So instead of taking cushioning away, they did the unthinkable. They added as much as humanly possible. The inspiration came from unusual places, like oversized ski equipment and fat mountain bike tires that soak up rough terrain. They built a shoe with 2 to 3 times the cushioning of a normal running shoe and a curved, rockered sole to roll you forward. They called the brand HOKA-11, a Maori phrase meaning roughly to fly. And honestly, the first shoes looked ridiculous. While everyone else was stripping shoes down, HOKA looked like a clown shoe. It stood out on the shelf for all the wrong reasons. For the first few years, almost nobody bought them. HOKA was a tiny company that could have disappeared at any moment. But that oversized sole wasn't a gimmick. The first time you ran in them, it genuinely felt like running on marshmallow. A small group of ultra runners became obsessed. And in 2013, a much bigger company noticed. Deckers Brands, the company behind UGG, bought HOKA. It reportedly paid only around $1 million. Remember that number. It will look absurd in a few minutes. But even with a new owner, there was still one problem standing in HOKA's way. All that cushioning normally comes at a cost: weight. A big, soft shoe is usually a heavy, sluggish shoe. So for years, HOKA stayed a niche brand, loved only by hardcore trail and ultra runners. Then, in 2014, they cracked it with a shoe called the Clifton. The Clifton had that same massive cushion, but it weighed under 8 ounces, lighter than most normal, thin trainers. Max cushion, minimum weight. That combination had basically never existed. Reviewers lost their minds. It won Shoe of the Year in 2014, and pairs started selling out. This was the comfort hook. One run in a Clifton, and first-time buyers turned into lifelong fans. But a great product isn't enough on its own. HOKA's next move is what really made it explode. HOKA didn't try to win everyone at once. They won the right people first. It started with the most extreme athletes on earth, ultra runners, people who race 100 miles through the mountains. HOKA's first sponsored runner was a legend nicknamed Speed Goat, Karl Meltzer, who has more 100-mile race wins than anyone alive. They even named a shoe after him. If a shoe can survive 100 miles of mountains, your 10-kilometer jog is nothing. When the best runners in the world trust a shoe, everyone else starts paying attention. But the real tipping point came from an unexpected group: people who stand all day, nurses, doctors, hospital staff. During the pandemic, workers on their feet for 12-hour shifts discovered that shoes built for 100-mile mountain races were perfect for a hospital floor. They became walking billboards, comfortable, recommended by podiatrists everywhere. And then fashion caught on. The same chunky, ugly sole that people laughed at became a style statement. Oversized sneakers were suddenly high fashion, and HOKA fit right in. By 2020, HOKA was cool, precisely because it wasn't supposed to be. It was for dads, and that made it cool. Once the experts, the workers, and the tastemakers all wore them, everyone else followed. By 2019, running had entered a new arms race: carbon plates. Nike had just released the Vaporfly, a shoe with a stiff carbon plate and a tall foam stack that made runners measurably faster. The ugly cushioned brand could have been left behind. Instead, HOKA built its own carbon racer, and to prove it worked, they sent Jim Walmsley out to run 50 miles as fast as humanly possible. He shattered the world record, averaging under 6 minutes per mile for 50 straight miles. The brand people once laughed at was now beating the fastest shoes on earth at their own game. And this is where it gets crazy. Look at the search interest for HOKA. Flat for years then, from late 2020, straight up. Now look at the money. This is HOKA's yearly revenue. In 2019, $223 million. 2021, $571 million. 2023, it smashed through $1.4 billion. Its first full year over $1 billion. 2025, $2.2 billion. And the most recent year, over $2.5 billion. That's roughly 10 times bigger in 6 years. Remember that $1 million price tag? That was one of the great bargains in business history. HOKA now earns almost as much as UGG, the boot brand that carried its parent company for decades. In the United States, it's neck and neck with Brooks for the #1 running shoe spot. But maybe the most impressive part isn't HOKA's numbers. It's what happened to everyone else. Remember the minimalist trend? The one everybody was chasing? It collapsed. By 2013, minimalist shoe sales had fallen around 30%, down to just 4% of the market. Runners were getting injured, making the switch, picking up stress fractures. Even the author of Born to Run admitted he never meant to start a fad. And in 2014, Vibram paid $3.5 million to settle a lawsuit over its health claims. The rule everyone had followed turned out to be wrong. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry quietly did a complete U-turn toward cushioning. Adidas launched its Bouncy Boost foam. Nike stacked its shoes taller and taller with ZoomX and the Vaporfly. New Balance, Brooks, Asics, Saucony. One by one, they all went max cushion. Today, thick, cushioned soles dominate the shelves of every running store. The industry even has a name for this shift: HOKA-ization. HOKA didn't follow the trend. It became the trend. So how did the ugliest shoe in running win? It wasn't luck. HOKA broke the #1 rule, but not just to be different. They spotted that the whole industry was wrong. They solved the one problem that made their bet work: weight. And they won over the right people before chasing the crowd. Everyone else zigged, HOKA zagged at exactly the right moment. From a shoe nobody wanted and a company sold for $1 million to a brand redefining an entire sport. Sometimes you don't need to follow the rules. You just need to break the right one. If you enjoyed this breakdown, a subscribe genuinely helps the channel out. I'll see you in the next one.